Thanks for joining us this morning. This morning we're going to run through our P6-Scrubber tool. I'm Nicole Jordan. I'm joining you actually from Montreal today, normally in Calgary, and I'm founder and CEO of Emerald Associates. With me doing the heavy lifting is Sue Hopkins. She's coming to you from Wyoming in the USA. So let's go ahead and run through P6-Scrubber. So P6-Scrubber, we built the tool for our own use as well as for client use several years ago. And in the last year, we've really put a lot of work into the user interface to make it easier to use. And Sue will show you in detail how easy this software is to use. Now, the main reason we built it was if you've ever had to deal with taking care of a P6 database, you know that you need to have some quality, make sure things are coming in well, keep all of the unwanted data out, and make sure that if there's anything missing, you can see it. So quality flagging was a big thing. So let's run through some of the typical struggles, common struggles that we all face when we're working in a multi-user environment. I'm going to ask a quick question before we jump into that. And just to see, for the folks who want to go ahead and answer, how do you deal with P6 projects from outside of your company? So I'm going to start a quick poll. If you want to answer, go ahead. If you don't, that's okay. And I'll share it if we get some responses. So what we find is that's a big challenge. When we've got a multi-user environment, multi-user environment, we may or may not have our outside consultants working in the system with us. Now, this means if they're not right in the system, you need to have a way to deal with their projects. So people might get the XCRs, they might modify that XCR directly, which is very dangerous. We've seen people corrupt their database doing that, so it's not a recommended approach. The other thing is some of our clients, as in the poll question, they have a secondary database where they do all the cleanup. It's kind of labor intensive. So what we're trying to do with Scrubber is to allow you to have a much more reliable, predictable, simple way to import XCRs, and we're working on the XMLs as well, so that you can make sure your P6 system does not get polluted with things that you don't want. Not only things that you don't want, but you also don't want any of your global data to be clobbered by something that comes in, especially calendars. Calendars is always a tricky one. Now, the other thing some of our clients have is in some large programs, they have specifications that they've given to their contractors or perhaps engineering companies of things they have to follow. And they want to make sure that they're following those. Okay? So there's not only a way to look at what's coming in, but you can also give some feedback. Okay? So Sue's going to run through that feedback loop so you can understand that. Let me ask another quick question, because this is always interesting to us. How much time do you spend actually dealing with cleanups each month? Okay, now this can be widely different, so the answers that you might provide will depend. So we have some clients that have hundreds of projects they're bringing in every month, just the way that they do it. They do updates every week, every 2 weeks. So there's a lot of cleaning up that needs to be done. If you're doing less importing, of course, it's going to be less. So it's more out of curiosity just to see what people are dealing with that we ask this kind of question. Okay, so it varies. It's going to vary, and that's pretty normal that we're expecting quite a wide range of answers. Now, of course, we didn't build Scrubber just for the fun of it. We built it because our clients were spending a lot of time, and it was often very frustrating work for the scheduling team to have to keep cleaning up data that was coming in. So not only to make their lives better, but also to not only to make their lives more efficient, but to make their lives better so that they didn't have to deal with that frustrating work and kind of get that level of frustration out of the mix. So let me run through how Scrubber works. So you have a file, you're going to import it. That XCR could be one project, it could be many projects. You bring it in and you go ahead and scrub it. Now, before you scrub it, you want to tell the computer what it's going to have to do. Okay, so there's definitions of what's going to happen. Plus, we've got some built-in checking. So some of you may still be dealing with POBS, large XCR files, and RIS type large XCR files. So we're dealing with some of that. We've got those utilities. We just embedded them inside a Scrubber. And then we start dealing with the data. Okay, so calendars, of course, is always a very tricky one. You don't want your calendars clobbered, overwritten by anything. Okay, so that's an important one. And then, of course, all the global data is very important for us to check and make sure we're getting a consistent, validated load. So user-defined fields, codes at all the levels, okay, activities, projects, resources, cost code validation if you use cost coding. So we've got those as well. And then we've got additional things that we can check, like certain validations, some rules, for example, on naming conventions. Okay, so again, some of our clients have very specific names, and we've got those validations in there. Okay, so I think I've given you enough of an overview. Why don't I hand it over to Sue, and she'll do a deep dive to show you how the software works. Okay, coming your way, Sue.
Okay. All right, going to share my screen here so that we can take a look at Scrubber Live. So P6-Scrubber comes in two versions. We have a standalone version that can be used without being connected to your database. So you can set up your definitions, your scrubbing rules, things like that, separate from your database. However, we can also connect it to a database so that you can validate and see what's actually in your database and map things over and take a look specifically so that they match. So just like P6, we can connect it to several different databases. So you're going to select the database, and I'm going to show the live version is what we call it. And this is the one that is connected to a database. So you're going to select your database and log in. And the standalone version works very much like this. The only thing that you don't have the advantage of is to compare to what you already have in your live data, in your P6 database at that time. So you'll see on the left here that we've got some areas where we can deal with the information that's in an XCR. So as we go through each kind of topic here, we have the ability to, validate your project ID and name, as well as your activity ID and name. And throughout, we have the ability to do codes at the project, activity, and resource level, as well as UDFs. Now, we can do some remapping of resources. We can also check our units of measure, and we can deal with calendars. So I'm just going to kind of pop into one of these and kind of go through a basic overview. Now, if I were to create a definition, is what we call it, from scratch. So I am going out, I am starting to define what I want to look at in my XCR when I scrub it. Now, the first thing I want to do is make sure that this particular area is enabled. So I'm going to enable this project code here. And then I've got a lot of different items that I can deal with. And actually, I'm going to go down to my activity codes so I can kind of show you some functionality here. So when I enable this, I have the ability to say whether, if I have anything extra other than what I have defined in my definition, what do I want to do with those code types in this case? And these screens are very similar to one another. So we've tried to keep it, of course, consistent with these. So if I wanted to add a code, I can simply, say I want to add it here. It's going to tell me I have a new one coming in. And let's say I want to add one called vendors. Now, it is a global code. And because I'm live, it's telling me that, I need to do some things here with this particular code. I've entered it. Now, what do I want to do with it? So I'm going to select what I want to do with it. Well, in this case, I want to keep that code. Then I can go over into my new code type name and I can say, all right, I want to find the one that matches. So I see that it's vendor. Okay, so I probably want to look for the proper code type name. That's going to tell me that I have a match in P6. So I now know that I do indeed have this code type in my P6 database. Now, I have the ability when I have a higher level, say global in this case, to roll down a particular code. And we can do this with calendars also. So if I don't want to pollute my global activity codes, I can actually choose to move this down to the project level just by clicking this little check mark. Now, I don't want to do that in this case, but I do have that ability. So now I want to define my dictionary values. So if I open up this little plus sign by my code type, I have the availability to add my dictionary values. Now I can add them one at a time with this plus button here, or we have the ability to bulk edit and to bring in those values. And what is great about this is I can copy and paste. So I'm just going to go over to my P6 here, and I am going to go into my activity codes. And first of all, I'm going to display all of them. And so here are all of my vendor values on my global activity code. So I can take this and I can copy these, and I can go back into P6-Scrubber and I can paste them in here. I could also do this from an Excel spreadsheet if I wanted to, or what have you. In any case, we can copy and paste. Now, I do have the ability to, if I have a header row that comes with it, so I do have one here, I can choose to take that out of there before I load it. And then I can also take a look at the columns that I have. Now, I don't need this color column, so I'm just going to remove that before I bring them in. Then I can apply, and it's already populated all of those values for me for my my dictionary. So I am able to do that quite easily. Now, what I want to do is, define everything that I want to handle within this XCR when it comes in. Now, an easier way that I could possibly do that is I have the XCR. Why not look what's in there and decide what I want to keep, what I want to remap, etc. So we do have the ability to import files. So I'm going to go ahead and import an XCR and show you what that looks like so that I can build it from the actual XCR. So I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to import that data from that XCR into P6-Scrubber. It's going to tell me that it is ready and I can apply. So I'm just going to start up at the top here and just kind of talk about some of the things that I can take a look at. Now, when I'm looking at an ID or a name, sometimes there are provisions that we've put out there, and we've specifications for our, let's say in this case, a contractor, that we want to have a certain pattern that is followed for my ID. I can enable that, and then I can go and start defining that ID. So I can do some pretty simple stuff with contains and start withs and ends, but I can also do a little bit more complex patterns. So if I do a simple pattern, I can essentially go in and say, start defining the pattern. Okay, first of all, I want all uppercase letters, and I need to see 2 uppercase letters. Next, I need to see 5 numbers. So I can go in, I can define that next, I want to see 5 numbers. Then I'm expecting a dash. So I can go in, I can say I want some specific text, and I want that specific text to be a dash. And then after that, it can be any combination of characters after that. So I'm going to just go and say I want any character. And if I set 0 here, it's going to say any unlimited amount of characters and apply. So I've defined the pattern that I'm expecting to see. Now I have the ability to test that pattern before I actually apply this and put it towards the project ID of my file. So right now I have nothing in here, so it's telling me that it doesn't match, obviously. Now, if I did grab something and it did match, it's going to say that it does actually follow those rules, and so it is valid. So I can self-check before I actually run this. Now, if I go into codes, remember we're in our live database. So I've been able to take a look at these project codes that have come in and decide what I'm going to do with them. So I have this here, and I can see that I have, oh, this has come out differently, so I apologize here. I normally have this, oh, yes, I do. So it's not matching here. And for some reason, it's not telling me that. But normally I would have a little, like a yield sign, a yellow triangle here, alerting me to the fact that some things didn't match. So in my District 5, if I go here, and what's probably happened is I did have the value there, so I didn't remove that. So I can say, all right, I don't want it to say dist 5, I want it to say D5. So I'm going to go ahead and remap that. It's telling me I have matches in my P6 database. I can go through and I can say, okay, I don't really want this client type, so I'm going to scrub it out. I don't want this client, so I'm going to scrub that out. And maybe I want to keep this type of schedule, and I want to take a look at what I've got here. All right. So now I want to decide if I have something extra than these codes that come in, do I want to remove those codes? So I do want to do that. However, on my values, say in the case of my type of schedule, I want to allow new values to come in. Maybe there's some new values that are being developed. Maybe this would be, something that changes over time. I can leave this blank, and anything new that comes in is going to come in and allow me to do that. So I can get those new values in there.
Yeah, so for example, let's say the contractor is going to create the equipment list, right, in their P6, tag it. You just want to let whatever they add for the equipment list to come in, right? Because you've agreed they're going to build it.
Correct.
So this way you're not stopping them from creating, because you've agreed they're going to do it, and having that stuff come in your database. So you have the flexibility to stop stuff that you don't want, and then also accept things that you want, including new things that are being built by, let's say, an engineering company, for example. They often build your system list or build your equipment list, and you want to accept those to come in. So that's how this is going to work. Sorry, Sue.
No, that's fine. All right, so in our UDFs, again, we have the information that's coming in. It's telling us what we have, what do we want to do with it. So I'm going to scrub a number of these. And in the way of a UDF, you can see that I have a WBS subject area here. Well, I don't want any WBS UDFs coming into my system. So what I can do is say I want to scrub the one that exists, and then I have the choice on what subject area I want to allow to come in and which I don't want to allow to come in. So I'm going to allow project UDFs to come in. However, I don't want any WBS ones coming in. So I'm going to check mark that. So I do have the ability to, based on the subject area, what to accept and what not to. Now, I can also, and actually I want this project ID to come in, I think. If I have, say in the case of this submittal date, now I have it, but I have a different UDF that I want this one to go into. This is my own submittal date, but I want to put it into another one called submitted date. So I can totally go in, I can start typing, and I can find that new UDF that I want to map this to. So I can then go and remap submittal date to submitted date and get that remapped so it doesn't pollute my my submittal column in my database. And so I can go and, like I said, pick and choose what I want to keep, what I want to scrub, and what I want to remap. And that goes pretty much, it's the same for all the codes in UDFs. Let's take a look at some resources. So what it's going to bring in those resources that are in my database. So let's say, I've got several pages here. So it's going to show me everything that's in all the resources. But in my case, what I want to do is I don't want to bring in all of this detail on my civil engineering. I want to actually report on it and capture it at a higher level in my database. So what I can actually do is come in and I can remap these. So I can come in and remap. And when I do that, it's going to tell me, if I hover over it, here's that yellow symbol here. And so that's telling me that there's some sort of warning. So I can take a look and I can say, okay, the matching value could not be found for the matching name. Okay, so that makes sense with me. So essentially, it's telling me that this engineering or ENG-CI does not have the same name. So I can delete that out and make sure that I'm mapping it to the proper name. I can do this again on the second one that I'm going to roll and just get summary information on. And you can tell that it also tells me that it's not matching in P6, meaning that, again, if I read my information there, it's going to say I don't have a matching name. And then this last one, I'm going to do the same thing. Now I've remapped all three of these up to a higher level so that I can just look at the summary data on that and not necessarily have to go down to that individual, those individual resources. I just want the summary information. Another thing we can do with our resources is take a look at our units of measure. So if I go into my units of measure, I can see that I've imported some units of measure in. And a couple of them are fine. They match just fine. But I have a new one here that does not match what is in my database. So what I can do is I can go out and see if I have something that is actually matching this that maybe I've defined differently. So when you do this, what the advantage to this is that we can actually not get a ton of additional units of measure defined out there based on what we've brought in. So instead of several different ones that are doing cubic meters, I can actually match the cubic meters in my database. So what I did is I deleted that out. I went and found the one that actually matches, and it looks like it has a capital M. And then it's telling me that my name doesn't match. So I can delete that out. And look, here's this cubic meters. Now, what I'm not going to pollute my units of measure with an additional cubic meters in there. I can actually say, okay, this is the same as what I have defined, and this is what I have defined. So I can also remap those. Now with calendars, we've done a few different things with calendars here. And the first one is dealing with your global calendars. Now, you're probably not going to want to bring in calendars at the global level into your database. Number one, if you have a standard 5-day work week calendar that is obviously coming in, and you already have that, but it's not defined the same as yours, it will overwrite what you already have. So you don't want to pollute that kind of data. So what we can do is we can actually roll that down to the project level. Now I'm going to do that with all of my calendars because in the event that I already have those, or I don't have anything, I don't have this calendar defined, I can actually keep my global calendars clean so that I don't mess with those. Now I can choose that every global calendar that comes in to roll those down also. And so I am going to choose that also because I really just don't want to pollute my global calendars.
So what about prefixing it so you get a naming convention? How have you tackled that in the past?
Okay, so if I wanted to say do something and I wanted to preface, say a calendar, and I have a particular preface or thing that I usually do so that I know what calendar it is, I can actually go in and remap this and rename it in my data or in the XCR. So let's say this is coming from an engineering company or something like that. So I can go and I can say say engineering company 1. I can preface that and it's going to take this standard 5-day work week, and then I've put that preface on it, and it's going to rename it so that I can identify those.
Okay.
So I do have the ability to do that.
Okay, yeah, good. So not only can you roll it down, you can also do a prefix of the
Correct.
project name or the company you got it from if you're wanting to understand what they're giving you. Yeah, okay, perfect.
Exactly. And you can do that on the codes and the UDFs as well. It's just as simple as going to, the new UDF type name and putting that preface there. So, or that prefix. So you can do that on any of these. So if you wanted to keep track that way and have those out there so that you can see them easily, that would be how you would do that on any of these pieces of data. Now, the second calendar area here is it's bringing in what project calendars are in my particular XCR. And this is for information purposes only. So let's say I wanted, I have this Rapley 6-day calendar. I know that it is the same as the calendar that I'm using at my global level. I could even rename it and tell it I want it to be this 6-day calendar on my global. So let's say I wanted to take this one and boy, that didn't work well, did it? Let me try to get that again. So I'm going to go and copy this. Let's try it again. And then I could say, all right, here's the 6-day calendar. I know it's the same as this 6-day calendar, and it would remap my global Jefferson calendar to my project Rapley calendar. Now, if I have more than one project in my XCR, it will actually, of course, identify that by the project ID. So, if I have, 2 or 3 projects that I have coming in, it will identify what the calendar name is as well as the project that it's coming in on. So in any case, even in activity codes, if it is a project level, it's going to identify that for me and tell me which project it actually belongs to. Now, in the case that I were rolling something down, let's say in an activity code, I can see that I have my projects here, my project activity codes. If I rolled down, let's say vendor in this case, it's only going to roll vendor down to the project that it's actually used in. So if it's only used in one project in my XCR and my XCR has several projects, it'll only roll it down to the one where vendor is used. So you don't, it won't be, adding a lot of extra idea or information to your XCRs or to your projects that are in there. Now, the last calendar that we deal with is the resource calendar. So let's say I have resource calendars that are already defined out here, and I want to be sure that it goes to the one that I have that I have defined for these resources. I can switch that, and it's going to remap that and assign that standard 5-day resource calendar to the resources. So we've taken a look at all of our different levels of our calendars. Now with roles, we can do the same thing pretty much as we do with our resources. If we needed to remap something, let's say I have this SCR roles that are that I want to remap these to. I can go in and I can change these the same way that I did on my resources. How that T keeps getting there. There we go. So now it's going to go in, change those names so that I am remapped. Now the last thing is our cost accounts. So it's going to bring in what your cost accounts were, tell you whether it matches. If I wanted to add, more definitions here, if I wanted to allow those cost accounts, new ones to come in, I could certainly do that. Or I could say, ignore anything else, to remove them and get that taken care of. Now, this is all great, but let's say I'm getting several of these files, of course, over the period of time. Maybe I get an update every 2 weeks. I don't want to have to go in and reinvent the wheel, so to speak, on this definition. Well, I can save these definitions so that they can be reused later. And the way that I do that is I go down to this Save and Load Definitions down here in the lower right-hand corner. When I do that, I have the ability to save as. So I can save as, give it a name. If I had some notes I wanted to put on this particular definition to explain it more, I could do that and then apply, and it's going to go out and it's going to save that definition so that, oh, it looks like I've got some, it'll tell me that I have some things that are not playing nicely. There we go. My vendor has some, information. So I deleted it so I didn't have to mess with it. Just gonna come through here really quick and make sure I don't have any more warnings. And let's try that again.
Yeah, so normally you would name it, the name of the project or the name of the contractor, engineering company, something like that. So that
Exactly.
end up with a library of these, right? And then you just use the one that you need depending on who you're getting the XCR file from.
Correct.
Okay, and then you just cross-check it, right? Because they could have
Yes.
added some stuff, right?
Right.
So,
So then you could say I have it saved and I want to, cross check or I want to use that definition. I can go back into my save and load definitions. I can choose the definition that I want to load or compare against my XCR, and I can load that in. Now I can tell which definition I have selected up here in this little box here. That's going to tell me which definition I actually have applied at that point. Now I could re-import that file and take a look at, what I have that matches and what I don't. But if I'm ready to go ahead and scrub that file now, I can then go down and scrub my files. So when I do that, it's going to pop it up and it's going to say, okay, let me know the file or files that I want to scrub. So I'm going to take actually 2 files and I want to scrub those at the same time on this definition. So I can go ahead and put them both in there and I can process them. And as they're processing, it's going to come, and when they are successful, it's going to give me the ability to view a report on those, which is something I'm probably going to want to do first. I want to see what actually has changed when this XCR was scrubbed. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to review that report. And when I do that, it opens up an XML report. And it's going to give me all the information about what changed and what didn't in my XCR when I had that definition. So it's going to give me some summary information up at the top. Now, if, I'll have kind of a scorecard here that says whether things were clean, whether I kept it, removed it, changed. If it's blank, it means that I did not have it enabled. So it's not going to, of course, do anything with that. And I can scroll down and then start seeing what was actually clean very easily and what was changed. So if it's not clean, that means something was changed according to the definition. Now the gray areas are what I had defined in my definition. And as I scroll down, it's going to then give me the results in these colored tables. So I can easily see that I scrubbed my client code, project code, as well as my client type. Then I have my district. Now, the dictionary changed on that, so I can see that. And my type of schedule, not only did I remap it, but I also had a dictionary change there. Then it's going to tell me in my dictionary what has changed. So I had this District 5. I told it to remap it to D5, and so it said it's remapped. On this schedule status, it actually added a new definition. So I can see that really easily for each one of my scrubbing definitions. How did it measure up? Now, if this is not scrubbing how I expect it to, I can go back, I can change my definition, rerun it, and make sure that my edits were what I wanted. And then when I'm ready, I can actually download those results. So when I download the results, I'm going to let me get up here to a area where we can find this again. Go to Scrubber. I'm going to save those files. Now, when I save them, I actually have 2 files that are downloaded. The first is my clean XCR, so the one that I've scrubbed. The other is an XML version of the report that we just looked at. So if I wanted to give feedback to my contractors and say, okay, this is what I found. These are the specifications that we wanted you to adhere to, and this is what we found. Could you please, correct these and send me that back? So I can give feedback very quickly to my contractors if that's what I need to do. Now, if I am I've scrubbed it and everything looks well and I am ready to import it, I can then import this XCR and I can tell that these are scrubbed because it gives me the date and time on those, and I can import that into my database. So I'm going to go ahead and pop on over to a P6 database where I actually have a scrubbed file that I've imported. Now that's this file here. What this is showing me is some neat little warnings and some results of the scrub that I did. So it's not only does it scrub it, it's going to give me some feedback that I can display in Primavera. I have some indicators that are set. So it's going to tell me whether it passed with a green check mark or whether there were changes with a red X. So I can see that I had some project codes and dictionaries that were changed. I do have that this D5 came through and it was actually a valid dictionary value. I have one that was added. And so it's going to give me kind of an accounting of what happened on that scrub. Now, another thing it's going to do is it's going to give me a notebook with, again, that's the results of that report. So I have that same report that is available here. If I go into my activities, I'm going to see really easily what happened on my scrub according to each activity. So it looks like my vendors did very well. I have greens all the way down, so that looks good. Now on my work type, it looks like I have some that are good, and then it's also giving me a warning that I have some work types that are missing here. So I might want to take a look at that and see if maybe, were they scrubbed out? Were they removed because they weren't valid? Or were they just not defined?
This flag can be really helpful if there's codes that you need to use for reporting, right? So this flags it right away and helps you see right away that they haven't coded stuff that you need. Okay, so that's important when you've got consistent reporting you're trying to achieve across the portfolio.
Absolutely. Now, on my discipline, I can see that I had some changes here. So the X means, remember, that it was changed. So I have a value that was probably added in this case. And then again, it's alerting me to the fact that I don't have some values in here. And maybe I need to take a look at that and check to see what happened to them. It's telling me about my UDFs. So I had a couple that were scrubbed out of here. So it's telling me that happened. And it looks like my cost accounts were all valid and things were okay there. Now, if I go back and take a look at other user-defined fields that I have at the project level, I also can display those user-defined fields for my activity codes. So I can see at the project level also whether I had issues at my activity level, or not issues necessarily, changes. Changes on my roles and resources, my activity codes, cost accounts, things like that. So I also have the ability to take a look at those at the project level. Now, let's say, for instance, well, no, we're not for instance. I'm going to show you that what happened with the roles and resources. So I'm going to open both projects. I wouldn't necessarily, of course, have my original project in this same database, but for comparison purposes, I have both of them in here. So I'm just going to change my layout really quickly here and look at my roles and resources and how those changed from the original to the scrubbed file. So in my original, remember I had those broken down, those resources that were a little more granular than I wanted to see. So I wanted to roll those up so I could look at them at a higher level. And then I have my role IDs where you can't see that these, it doesn't give me my entire path here, but they were EAI and I changed them to SCR. So I've got, again, that indicator showing me that. Now, of course, P6-Scrubber is meant to keep your database clean. What if you don't want these indicators or that report that comes in? Now, we've allowed for that. So if you really don't want to be able to display what has happened in the way of indicators, or you don't want the report to come in with that file, back in P6-Scrubber, we have one more piece that I want to show you. So I'm going to go ahead and close this down where I was scrubbing, and we're going to take a look at this general tab here. Now, this is where I can decide whether I want the notebook to be created and imported with the file, with the XCR, or whether I want those UDFs to be created, those indicators. By default, they are set to yes. But if, say, I wanted to keep the notebook, but I don't want to keep the file, I can or the indicators, I can turn off those indicators. And when I scrub this, it's only going to create the notebook instead of the indicators. So we've tried to, again, help you keep your database clean. And if that means you didn't want those indicators, then by all means, you don't need to have them in there. So before I turn it back to Nicole, are there any questions while we're in the live area so I could address those?
Not so far, Sue. So it looks like either
Okay.
people have no idea what you're talking about, or it's
or it's crystal clear.
pretty clear. Yeah. So really, the idea here is you can scrub, which holds things back, keeps them right out from coming in. You can remap. You can rename, and you can match things. It's really what we're trying to give you the ability to do before the file comes in. And one project or many projects. And you've got definitions, so you can reuse them so that you don't have to run through that from scratch every single time, right? So, okay, I think that's good. So I'll do the wrap up, and again, feel free to just chat in any questions if you have any. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so Sue ran through how you set the definition up, how you can pull your XCRs in, and how you can run through and do the cleanup. So let me run through some of the benefits that our team and our clients have found with the tool. So Sue touched on quite a few of them as we went through, but let me just recap. So from a user's perspective, one of our case studies is a large DOT program in the US where the folks doing the schedule reviews are not really P6 experts. They are field engineers that are working directly running the projects and getting those schedules in. So this has made their lives a lot better because they're not P6 experts, but they're the closest to the project and they interact with the contractors. So they can, the definitions are set by the scheduling team. They can run it in and very quickly give the contractor feedback because there are spec requirements and things that they have to marry up to. So that is saving them a lot of time and they're able to give the feedback very quickly. Now in this particular example, they are doing updates in some cases weekly, but definitely every 2 weeks and every month. And there are reporting gates at each of those to the program management group. So this is making that achievable. So it's a big, big win for them. You saw it's very easy to use, okay? It's not hard to learn and very easy to use. And then you can share these definitions. So that also helps make things easier. The ability to get definitions and repurpose them. And you saw the outputs, right? We're trying to get a lot of nice visuals, so it's easy to see what's going on, and you can use your regular filters, layouts, and that good stuff to find what's going on. Okay, so in some of the cases, the person doing the scrubbing may not be the scheduler who's actually working the schedule. So that gives the feedback to the scheduler in P6. Now, if you've had to administer P6 and you've got a large group with lots of different players, different plants, perhaps different divisions, departments, you know it can be challenging sometimes to ensure who's allowed to do imports and exports, and what is going on in the system. And some of you may have experienced your data getting clobbered by somebody else's import. Okay? Special calendars can be very problematic. So this should make this a lot easier. And you won't even know if someone overwrote your calendar. That's the most frustrating part, right? All of a sudden your dates may not be making sense and you just don't know what happened. Okay. So this takes that frustration and that time sink of wasted time trying to figure out what's going on out of the mix. Okay. It's much easier to manage what's going on. And then if you had to do cleanups in another database and then move the projects over, also, you know that this can be very time consuming. Okay? So this takes all that out of the mix. And the last piece really is that accuracy. So you saw the flagging on the reports are available for reports on fields that didn't have any data in them. Okay? Nothing more frustrating than trying to run a report and you're missing coding. This highlights that. Okay, good. Now, okay, there was one question. This will work with projects, but not as much for turnarounds. Not quite sure what the thoughts are there. Not as much for turnarounds. Well, I think generally what we've experienced, I think, in turnarounds is there's a little less importing, I would say. Except maybe towards the beginning. At the beginning, there might be lots of importing with equipment lists, maybe work packages, work orders. So I'd say maybe the value is more at the beginning, but once a turnaround's in full swing, there's usually a lot less importing, I would say. So yeah, maybe the value is more at the front rather than the back end. And then the other part of that question was, how does the licensing and cost work? Okay, so that's a good question. So let me address that. So the pricing is per project. So it's not by user, it's the number of projects that you bring in. Okay, so we sell it by package. So maybe a scheduling expert who's consulting with companies, that person may need like a 10 project package for the next year. Or a larger organization with lots of importing, they may need hundreds. Okay, so it's a sliding scale by project. That's how we sell it, okay? Not by user. And that way you can share things, and there's no issue there whatsoever. So if you're at the end, I'll give you a chance to let us know if you want us to send pricing or to discuss more, and we can run through that. Okay, so thanks for joining us today. Of course, today we went through our Scrubber tool, but we've got a lot of different apps that we've built over the years for P6, of course, and we've got webinars on the go. So if you're interested in auditing P6, finding out who's deleting things, if you're interested in loading data from Excel, we've got our loader. If you want an easier way to do updating, we've got our CAPS tool, which is a grid, very simple, easy to use grid-based updating, or our TAPS tool, which is our barcode scanning tool. If you want to do more things with your P6, we've got our P6 calculator, which is fantastic. It's a great add-on. It does archiving, it does flagging, calculations, currency controls, all sorts of great stuff. So just let us know. You know, the intent of these tools is to make your life better. make the tools work more for you, rather than you have to do so much data entry to maintain the systems. Of course, that's because from the beginning, we've always had a strong programming team, because integration and automation has always been a key foundational element that Airline provides. So let me just give you guys a chance to let us know how you want us to follow up. If you're interested in understanding pricing or just want to discuss it more, just want to stay on the mailing list, or if you have someone else that you think you want us to show the solution to, go ahead and you can just communicate through this little poll question. It helps us know how we should follow up with you. Okay, that way we're not, we're keeping in communication the best method for you. Okay, so we'll stay on for a few more minutes if anyone else has any other questions, but the tool's fairly easy, so hopefully you got the gist of how it works. And if you do want to understand a bit more, you can go ahead and email Sue, and she can help run through scenarios or help you understand how this could be beneficial within your group. Okay, great. I'm going to stop the recording here, and we'll stay on for another minute. If there are any questions that come to mind, go ahead and throw them in the question room.